Good evening and welcome to our webinar, Civic Engagement Personal Journeys, developed by the Social Science Education Consortium as part of the first ever National Civic Learning Week. I've posted in the webinar chat a link to the main Civic Learning Week website, and there'll be a couple of documents that I'll be posting during the webinar, and they're actually in a Google Drive, an SSCC Google Drive that you can download and be watching as we're going through. Well, and I'm very pleased to be joined this evening by two members of the millennial generation who are going to reflect with us on the influence of people and experiences that they have had over the years that kind of have shaped their journey into civic engagement. We'll explore the role that people they knew played, school, and we'll match that against some research that was done about proven practices in civic learning. Research has identified actually now about 10 promising practices. And we'll reflect on that as we go through to see how many of those we've bumped into and what influence they had. And at the end, I hope that we'll also look at where do we think there are deficits right now? Either in our own experiences, we look back, we wish we'd had this, or in working with young people, which I know you both do. What do we need to do a better job of? Because it's lacking right now. So I think it'll be a productive discussion. So let me introduce our panelists, starting in reverse order. V. Andy Vargas. I'm going to read this here so I can get it right.
You don't have to read the whole thing either. Don't worry, it's probably going to be long.
I did edit it just a bit, so not to worry.
Good.
Andy Vargas serves as the state representative of the 3rd Essex District, which is the city of Haverhill in Massachusetts. He is the vice chair of the Economic Development and Emerging Technologies Committee, sits on the Ways and Means, Education and Public Health Committees, and vice chair of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. Other than that, he's not really very busy. Representative Vargas grew up in Haverhill, and his family's origins are from the Dominican Republic. He's a proud graduate of Haverhill High School. What's the mascot of Haverhill High School?
Well, we're called Hillies, but the mascot's kind of like the thinker out in front.
Impressive.
Yeah, the thinker,
impressive. Yeah. The thinker. Go thinker.
There's some thinking that happens there, yeah.
Yeah, right. And a proud graduate of Boston University. And I think we met actually your freshman year in related to the Massachusetts Commission.
Yep.
At 22, Representative Vargas was elected city councilor. He focused on education equity. 2 years later, in 2017, he was elected in a special election to serve as a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives for the 3rd District. He has been involved in the passing of legislation in civic education, student nutrition, and an advocate for the landmark Student Opportunity. Is that a special program?
The Student Opportunity Act was the landmark Chapter 70 reform.
Okay.
Yep.
And now he champions the extension of universal school meals and hopes to make it permanent. Well, that would be a great idea. He lives in Haverhill with his wife and Yankees fan. Well, that's unfortunately. Can you pronounce her first name?
Raquelma.
Well, of course you can. I didn't really mean can you, but I mean will you?
Yes.
And 1-year-old son, Ruben.
Ruben, yeah.
Right. So it's great to have you, Andy. We'll reminisce a bit as we go through this. Aaron Ryan is a middle school social studies teacher in Cohasset, Massachusetts. A double tenure, as they say at the U. Got a bachelor's degree in secondary history education in 2008 and a master's degree at what is now called the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. That's a mouthful. Beneficiaries of her teaching skill have included the schools in Stoughton and Chelsea, as well as less traditional settings. She was a hospital teacher for Educational Corporation, which focuses on special education and classroom development in a mental health environment. She got some curriculum development experience, which is a great thing for teachers to do. at Arbor Foley Hospital and at the Bridge Center, where she co-developed a 6-week program in music, art, and drama. See, social studies people, they can do anything. Uh, she arrived in Cohasset and has been tapped to teach world geography, ancient civilizations, eighth grade civics, and not unlike social studies teachers, even within the field of social studies, we end up being asked to teach a lot of different branches of the field.
Right.
So clearly you've been busy too because you are a teacher, and teachers we know are very busy. Thank you, Erin, very much for agreeing to be with us this evening.
Of course, pleasure.
And we have gotten just a little touch of who you are just from the brief bio, but I want to look more deeply at your growing up experience to see what kinds of things influenced your commitments to civic engagement. And but before I do that, I do want to show you. I mentioned that there were these proven practices that people have been talking about. Researchers saying, "Boy, that's a really good, these things are the cat's meow," as they used to say. So let me go ahead and show those to you all. Hopefully you're seeing that on your screens now. Is that true?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Just checking. So in 2003, researchers came up with 6 proven practices: content-related courses, experience and deliberation about controversial issues, service learning, student-led voluntary associations, students having greater voice in schools, and simulations of adult civic roles. And then added, since in additional research, they recommended 4 additional proven practices. More focus on news media literacy education, that is very important. The notion of action civics, where do we have opportunities to practice what we've been taught, and what does that look like? Social and emotional learning is certainly part of it, and school climate reform, because we know that if there's a closed classroom and school climate, it's very difficult to engage young people in the work of civic education. So I'll bring this up again later, but I just wanted to tease the participants, the attendees, about the kind of categories that you'll be reflecting on, but also categories they might reflect on as well. So let me go back and start at the beginning, and that is families. There weren't, family wasn't listed on those lists of proven practices, but it seems to me that as first teachers, families are very important in the development of sort of pre-civic engagement, sort of the character and sensibilities. And so I'd like to ask if Erin, have you start with this.
Sure.
Reflect back at your, tell us something about your family, where you grew up, and your early school experiences.
So I grew up in Western New York, and I was in
Whereabouts?
Rochester, New York, and I started off in a public school and was not thriving very well there. So in the 4th grade, I transferred to a different school, and that I think really changed everything, changed my life.
And
Uh,
what was it about the school, that new school, that made you thrive?
So one of the things that I thought was pretty incredible about it, other than empowering kids to sort of take control over their own learning, I remember being surprised that for a research course, I could choose what I wanted to research. So of course I went dinosaurs, but I remember saying
Didn't
like,
we
I have a
all?
choice. I have a voice. This is incredible. I can decide what I'm going to do. It's not just a worksheet after a worksheet. And the other thing that they did that I thought was pretty extraordinary and didn't really realize at the time how rare it would be to do that is every Thursday, starting in 5th and 6th grade, we would go out and do community service day the whole afternoon. So we would learn in the morning, have lunch, and then the rest of the day was doing some sort of service activity. It could be um, spending time with folks in a nursing home that just would light up when they saw a bunch of 5th and 6th graders piling in. Sometimes it was organizing food at a food bank or checking it for quality. And my personal favorite, was going to parks and cleaning them up. So we would just walk around for 2.5 hours with trash bags and just pick up garbage and
Well, let
and
me ask you
make the
this.
space look better.
Obviously, you didn't go out and sign up for the new school. Your parents had something to say about that. So I'm curious about what qualities your parents had that that fostered this kind of independence and a willingness to engage in things like service.
So my father's a retired radiologist now, but he was a radiologist in my childhood. He was very busy, and his constant commitment to serve people, to scan their scans and find what was wrong, so that they could seek treatment. He would also teach, because every good doctor can also help, and school the next generation. That's actually part of the Hippocratic Oath, I believe. And so he was always a teacher. My mother was a psych major in school, and that definitely helped me just when I was growing up. She taught me a lot about human behavior, to think about it almost from an anthropological standpoint, which is why I think I teach ancient civ and social studies now, because it's always
There you go.
fascinated me, human behaviors, civilizations, politics. So she was always first to volunteer, to take us on these service days. So it was always my mom's car. Who's going with my mom and me to the park? Who's going with my mom and me to the preschool? So the fact that she was always there, and she continues to always be there, to support not only my growth in school academically, but also that service
Cool.
action that I would do all the time. And I look forward to it. We all did. So it was about showing civic engagement in a really positive, fun way,
Yeah.
at a very early age. I think that put me on a certain trajectory.
And Andy, does any of that resonate with you as you reflect back on your family
Yeah,
and upbringing?
absolutely. So my mom's a nurse practitioner and definitely service oriented. And after mass on Sundays, would provide free screenings and care for folks that were in our congregation in Spanish language mass. My dad had his own nonprofit for the last 30 years, working with hospitals and public safety departments that have surplus equipment that they want to donate to the Dominican Republic. And so as a teenager, I would remember waking up at like 5 a.m. on a Saturday to drive out to some random fire department in Vermont that wanted to donate their equipment. And at the time, you're disgruntled as a teenager, right? You're like, why do I have to wake up this early? Because, of course, you've been playing video games all night. But as you grow older, you realize what you're doing and you realize the impact that you're having. And so growing up in that environment of service in my household definitely played a role in my life. And then I would say also all the holiday parties that we had in my family, there was constant debate, whether it was about religion, Protestants and Catholics, gay marriage, U.S. imperialism in Latin America, you name it, there was always a debate happening at the kitchen table. And the thing that I found most beautiful about it was that once the food was ready, once one of my aunts came out, she said, "Ya basta, la comida está lista, the food is ready." Everybody was quiet and we ate together as one family. It didn't matter where you were on the political spectrum. So I think growing up in that environment definitely influenced my interests. And then my favorite teachers were social studies teachers, and they were dynamic and they made these characters come alive. So that combination really piqued my interest.
Cool. And being part of a greater community, ethnic community, is likely part of that story of sort of being integrated into traditions and working together and watching out for each other and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Cool. Now, of course, there isn't family is not. We can't really mandate families working in certain ways, but certainly when we get to school, school is one of those places where it's really the first place that people leave the private environment, and now they're thrown into a public space where they have to deal with that. Do you recall, as you were going through school, maybe as going through high school, for example, did you become more adept at interacting with other folks? Did you hang out with people who kind of shared your same values? Oh yes, I didn't
That's
prep anyone
Andy.
for that.
Sorry.
Andy, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So for me, high school was very hard, socially, candidly. I never fit in with any of the buckets or groups. I was the only Latino student in my AP and honors classes, and all my cousins were in other classes. And candidly, I wasn't, quote unquote, white enough for my AP and honors kids. And then I wasn't, Latino enough for the other kids, right? And so I kind of grew up in this environment where I was trying to kind of try to fit in or find my space in both of those spaces, which ended up being a blessing because now I can navigate both spaces, right? It ended up being a huge asset to me. But what it also allowed me to do was view the inequities and the gaps in our school system. And one of the things that I noticed was that I was an AP Gov student being offered the opportunity to volunteer on a congressional campaign and get course credit for it. But my cousins and some of my acquaintances in other classes, the college prep comprehensive classes, were getting told they had to memorize the preamble and that was their civics, their exam, right? And so the opportunities that I had as an AP and honors student to do project-based civics out in the community weren't available to all students. And it wasn't until I got involved with an organization called Teens Leading the Way, which is a statewide coalition here in Massachusetts, that I started to think about the ways to address that. And so Teens Leading the Way brought young people from across gateway cities in particular out to some random remote part of either Maine or Vermont for a retreat and asked them what kind of policy they want to implement at the State House. And when I was involved, we kicked around all sorts of ideas. And ultimately, yep, there's the retreat. Great picture, John.
What was going on there?
So this was one of our retreats, and we were practicing our pitch. And there you can see the baggy jeans, the sandals and socks. And we were probably practicing our pitch there for our bill. And so at the time, we kicked around all these ideas from gun violence to police community relations to climate change. And ultimately, what we settled on was civics education. Because we said, as long as we don't have an informed and engaged electorate, we're just going to be nibbling on the edges of all these issues. If we truly want transformational change and to really have a sustaining impact in our democracy, then we're going to have to make an investment in civics education and make sure that everyone receives civics education. So yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, just I'm curious about whether you see a connection between a feeling of being on the outside and wanting to do something about that motivated you to say, well, this is nuts. We need to do something about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason or a big reason why I was able to do that was because I had mentors and, adults at the time looking out and saying, you can do something about that, right? If something bothers you, here's what you can do about it. And Teens Leading the Way was sort of that vehicle for me. But I didn't sort of arrive there on my own. There was some kind of facilitation that needed to happen as well.
Cool. And you were still in high school at the time, is that right?
Yeah, I was 16 and I walked into the State House for the first time to advocate on our civics education bill. Super cynical about it. I thought all the politicians just wanted to take pictures with teenagers and look good. But I was proven wrong. We had 48 co-sponsors on our bill, bipartisan support. And as a teenager, got to learn about the legislative process. We testified before a committee. I think we were the first hip hop video to be used in testimony. So it was a great experience where I was hooked. I won't tell you the first song, but the full song, but the hook of the song was "On the Grind, Gotta Do This, Not Talking a Car, Civics is the Movement."
Yes,
all right.
it's like early Hamilton.
That's right.
There you go. You inspired Hamilton. I think that's great.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And Aaron, what about you? As you went you're in high school and approaching graduation, were you the kind of person in high school that just got involved in everything? You were on every committee, on every outside stuff you could do?
I gotta tell you, I felt like I was on the outside too. And
Really?
well, I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and ninth grade, end of ninth grade, I got hit with acute myeloid leukemia. So I
Ooh.
was out of school for a good 6 months. I missed a lot of the sort of social bonding time that happens ninth to 10th grade. When I got back, I was very weak. I didn't have any hair. I I struggled a little bit as far as getting in with the cool crowds. And that was okay in that I got to sort of watch and perceive and continue my study of um, humans, I guess, and sort of sociology, which I absolutely adore.
So this is
And
what humans are like, huh?
it's kind of was that. And I also I think when I got this reality check that tomorrow isn't promised. When I was fighting and fighting and struggling so much, it gave me a new lease on life. And in many ways, I started associating more with my teachers than I did with my own peers. So that was sort of I always knew I wanted to be a teacher since second grade. I knew I wanted to do that. But I
Good.
think when I came back to high school, that's when I really started to go, okay, what subject do I want to teach? It started to become more of a specialization time for me to process. And my favorite teachers, same thing with Andy, they were the social studies teachers, and the ELA teachers and the drama teachers. And I thought maybe there's a way I can combine all of three of these things, which of course now I do all the time, every day. It's always an ELA lesson and a social studies lesson, and if we can kick it up and do something hands-on and dramatic, let's go. So I think my high school started to set me on the path toward education, and it wasn't until later that I realized so much of what I received um, during my treatments was on account of my socioeconomic privilege. And that started to become very important to me, to focus on students who are hospitalized, the education that they're receiving, the quality of education they're receiving, if any. And that, I started to be drawn more to this idea that education should be universal, that just because you're in a hospital room doesn't mean that you should not be getting educational services. So.
And that's why you got involved, when you were in college and after college. Some of your
Yes.
teaching locations were to serve folks who are having particular challenges. Isn't that interesting how that those circumstances can really generate a feeling of need that you think you could fulfill? Because one
Right.
of the challenges is one may wish to have an effect, but never really know that they can or do. It's a question of what they call efficacy. Can I have the impact that I want to have, either politically, and if you can I really do this? Can I have an influence? Or in teaching, can I really do this? How did you develop confidence in your ability to influence others, which I think is a big part of civic engagement? Andy, why don't you start with that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's just through practice, right? I mean, like any other skill or muscle, the more you do it, the more you gain it. And I also think it's, being transparent about the fact that to this day, there are still times where, you feel insecurities or like, can I really do this? Right. That feeling never really goes away. It's a matter of being able to check that feeling at the door and come back to your why and why you do this. And remember all the work that you've done to get to where you're at. And for me personally, and maybe this is the Catholic guilt kicking in, but it's also to remember the work that my parents and my grandparents, went through, and the challenges that they went through that are 3, 4, 5 times more challenging than what I have to go through. Some might say that's not a healthy framework, but it is one that I've used for fuel to get me through certain circumstances and to provide me the confidence to be able to move forward and file legislation and get legislation passed and bring people together to get things done.
Which makes me wonder, now that you graduated from high school and you're in college, Aaron, what what influences can you locate as a college student, either in terms of faculty or fellow students or courses that had a particular influence on you, or maybe they confirmed what you had believed earlier about what your destiny would be?
Yeah, I would say from the first day, I mean, my ED 100 course, which is pretty much, it should be labeled, "Are you sure you want to be a teacher?" Question mark. Because it sort of takes you through everything. And I think I knew there that I was on the right track. I think my confidence developed much later because I think as I was going, I thought I knew what I was doing for the first couple of years. The courses I was taking, I was enjoying. I actually switched. I originally was an ELA major, and then I switched to history. I had one summer where I spent it on board a ship,
Huh.
a tall ship through the Met College at BU,
Oh
and I
yeah.
learned how to sail and I
Wow.
got 4 college credits. To me, that sounded like a
You know,
dream.
you never know when you're going to need those skills.
Exactly.
I missed that
Exactly.
class in the offerings. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Well, it was one of those moments. I was packing up, everyone was packing up to leave, and a professor walked in and just said, "Hey, if I could have 5 minutes of your time, I lead this summer course. It's 4 credits. It's an intensive, but it's an incredible experience." And I said, "I'm game. I'm not doing
Yeah.
anything this summer. Let's go. Let's see what happens." And I just fell in love with history. I
Hmm.
fell in love with the community. It taught me that to build something or learn something with that hands-on experience was you can't replace it.
Yeah,
You can't make
it's
up
the
for it.
experience. Yeah, it's experience of putting into action the stuff that motivates you. Yeah, have you ever thought of? We civically engage in all different ways, so there's no one way to express that. Andy has sort of done it the, I don't want to say the extreme way, but the pure way, which is going right into politics, and it takes a certain kind of
I've never heard pure and politics in the same
yeah, I
sentence.
know. Yeah. Well, I was going to say it takes a thick skin too. But most of us, act out our civic engagement in different ways. And I was wondering, Aaron, how you feel about the notion of teaching as civic engagement.
Oh yeah, I think that when students and part of this was again, I started in not a very good experience in public school and now I'm a public school teacher, right? So I think a lot of times when we are in a classroom and we feel like we're not being heard or that the teacher is not really in it to win it, they really don't, they're not being called to be a teacher in the way that I think
Mhm.
a lot of great teachers hear that call early. I'm noticing it now in some of my seventh graders. Just that student that checks and makes sure that her teammates are ready with their index cards. It's that type of behavior that you pick up on that you
Mhm.
realize when someone is reaching out beyond themselves and they're trying to offer any assistance in any form. And it can be so simple and so small. And it can also be a huge case where someone really needs a lot of help. That's what I want to not only model for my students in how often I tell them how much I care about them, how often I bring in a lesson I'm all excited about because it's something that I built, that I created for them. I'm trying to model that idea
And
of
they feed off your enthusiasm.
I think so, yeah, because if you can think it up and think creatively and dream it and make it happen, and you show that and you demonstrate that, it's going to empower a whole new generation of students to go, me too. I can do that as well. And so
Which
that's
underscores, yeah, I was going to say, what underscores the importance of collaborative work in the classroom. You got to get kids working with each other because
all the time.
citizenship is about working with each other and not killing each other and having disagreements but working through it. So
Right.
it may be that we need to do more of that in schools, more of that collaborative work. And Andy, you continued your from the get go as a freshman. You did I show that picture already?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I got to get this right. Am I going the wrong way?
I think I know which one you're the one with signing the civics bill.
Well, you didn't sign it, but I know what you're saying.
Oh no, I did not sign it.
Yeah.
No.
Now that was that the end of the process because we had been on the Massachusetts Commission, And was this the legislation that came eventually out of that work?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The bill I was talking about earlier when I was a teenager at the State House advocating for mandated civics, some version of that was still kicking around when I joined the legislature as a 24-year-old in 2017. And so when I joined the legislature, I met with all my colleagues and I said, hey, I met some of you 8 years ago. You're still here. And I talked about how civics was so important then. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get this done now? Yeah, so that was my freshman year of college. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think I was sitting to your left
Yep. Yep.
at that meeting. So,
And so this commission's work was critical to laying the foundation and the roadmap for the 2018 bill that we got across the finish line. And so to show the full arc, went from a teenager dabbling in civics education, ironically, by trying to get civics education mandated, to then eventually 8 years later becoming a rep, and then talking to my colleagues and advocating to actually get the bill done. It was a really cool sort of full circle moment. And one that I also used to demonstrate how long it can take to make systemic change. I mean, that was 8 years, all right? And I think that's part of the challenge and things that we have to keep in mind when we're working with young people in this space, which is there's direct service, like we talked about, a little bit earlier. There's systems level work. There's work that sometimes takes years to get done. And I think it's important for us to show those different levels of impact and mitigate expectations while not taking away the hope and aspirations that they have.
Yeah, I'm going to show you, go back again to this picture, because we've sort of navigated this has been your life that you've discussed, and you're continuing your whatever ways you want to continue to mold your civic engagement, which will change over time. People have different careers. Who knows? Andy, I might be at your inauguration someday, and Aaron, when you're I don't know, a ship's captain. Who knows where that'll take you? But I wanted to put this back up again to sort of look back on two questions. One is, given your experiences, where do you see the influence of these practices, and where do you wish among these practices you would like to have had more of? That's the second question. And third, where should we be doing a better job with communities, not only in the classroom, which is very important, but also in community work, community organizing? Aaron, why don't you start with this? Which of these shine out to you?
Well, I wanted to start too by saying how grateful I am that that bill passed, because I was teaching along, doing my geography and ancient civ curriculum and development and teaching. And then when we heard that there was going to be a new civics course, that changed everything. And I think it changed it for so much the better, because I recall not really taking a civics class or thinking about it until maybe my senior year. I remember teaching a civics course for seniors, and it was strange to be talking about these systems and structures to kids who were about to be adults and ready to vote. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I was tasked with teaching civics, we had a civics teacher retire, and I was next. It was me. It was my turn to teach civics. I was a little scared because I didn't have a lot of background and strength in that. I could talk about history all day, but it was a bit daunting to consider a new course, right? We talk about the first bullet point there of courses in civics. Right. So to have that in a middle school for 8th grade students instead of a World I course was so important to me to get it right. And I knew it was going to be a struggle. I knew that I needed experts around me. And that's why I was so grateful to have some of the family that I married into, right? My father-in-law, who recently passed, Alan Ryan, had a lifetime of civic engagement and work for our government. So I knew that I'd have to go to the experts to develop these courses. And that's one of the important things I want to keep in mind is
Sure.
what courses are we designing? Are they reaching our student populations? A 12th grade civics course is going to look or should look very different from an 8th grade civics course, right? So to me, that was a really important proven practice for me to get the course right, for 8th graders to be able to comprehend, engage in, and sometimes enjoy.
Cool.
Often it's
Yeah,
possible.
that would be nice too. Andy, take a look at that list and what jumps out at you as something worthy of particular comment?
Yeah, I mean, action civics for me is really, my bread and butter, right? I think it's great that we need to have a really strong curriculum. But I think when we throw students into the field and expose them into spaces that they've never been to, like the State House, for example, where they can see hopefully people that come from their neighborhoods working and trying to change laws for the better. I think that just opens up new worlds of possibilities for so many students. And one of the things that I always share with students is that they are subject matter experts in the lived experience that they've had, right? And so whatever challenges that they've gone through, I try to instill that makes them subject matter experts to address that challenge, to address that problem, because they have the lived experience and can help inform at least the discussion, the civic discussion in that space. The other thing that I find interesting about this list, for 2003 rather, deliberations of current controversial issues, it makes me think of the challenges with that right now, right? Where so many states are having a really tough time with, Florida in particular, with having controversial conversations in the classroom being effectively banned. And I think, that's something that we have to be real steadfast about, that it's okay to have controversial conversations about current issues in a safe environment, in a respectful environment. In fact, that's where we want students to do it. If there was something I could have more of, I would say more school climate related work for students, because I feel like that's really where students can get hands-on and into the weeds on issues. The writing to your legislator is great and really, important and a great exercise to do. But meeting with your principal or superintendent because you want fresher meals or you want to make your case for extended, recess or, calf time. I mean, that kind of work is so real and so empowering when you as a student are able to see how your voice at a table with a decision maker can at least influence or push the discussion further. I think more of that is a really effective way to show students how to develop power maps and use their voices to make change in a very tangible way.
I'm glad you mentioned this thing about action civics because it is controversial at this point. But the analogy that comes to mind for me is like teaching a driver's ed class and having classes about how the engine works and how the physics of movement of the car works and the history of cars and whatever. And then the teacher says, okay, well, that's it. Good luck. Thank you very much. And, kid raises his hand and says, well, excuse me, are we not going to get behind the wheel of a car? And he says, well, are you crazy? The insurance would be, people would get upset if you made a mistake and you're on your own. And it seems to me that the place to make those mistakes and to be guided around them and through them is when you're with a person who can help guide that. We know that in every profession, whether you're an athlete or a politician or a teacher, you get better at it by doing it. Mm-hmm. And it seems that, and I think part of the fear is that a lot of adults aren't good at it either. And they worry that action civics will simply be what we see on the TV screen all the time. But that's not really what we're talking about. And we can do a better job. But it's a challenge for sure, because there you need to bring in the community, the school community, the neighborhood, and get a buy-in to all of that. Well, I'm told that the chat box isn't open, so I'm going to do a couple of things. Let me stop. Well, a minute. I told you that I had placed in there some links, but you can't read the links because they're in the chat box that you're not only the panelists are privy to that. But those are the places that you can go to find the Civic Learning Week. If you don't have a chance to jot the Google Drive information down, just email me, and I will be happy to send that along. I'm at SSEC at ssec-inc.org. Altogether now, SSEC at ssec-inc.org, and I'll be happy to send that to you. Yeah, I just want to make sure. I just want to do one more thing. Okay. Oh, there you go. There you go. I didn't want to miss these pictures, Aaron, because this is where you're doing a lesson on checks and balances.
Oh
This
yeah,
is
we
what
turned
you,
it
right?
into yeah, I've typically seen the diagram, the triangle diagram, that always shows arrows of this check happens on this branch and so on. And I thought that can be a very confusing infographic, if you've never experienced it. So one of the things that I did is I turned it into a game, almost like Jeopardy, where the team was the class was split up into three different branches. So they were all repping their different branches, which was also very fun for them. And they would take a arrow off of the board with a certain point value, and depending on the point value was a more challenging check. And they had, I think it was 30 seconds to get in a wheelie chair, and they had to go to wheel over to the branch and point at the branch that they were checking.
Ah,
And that just made it so much more fun for them to understand the system of it all. And then when I assessed them, it was incredible how on top of it they were, because they were putting themselves back in that simulation of, I am a member of the legislative
ah,
branch and I'm checking the executive. I'm pointing right at you. And they would look at to me and they would hear a sound if they were right, or if they were wrong, they would hear those two sounds, and just drilling that. Um, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about comprehensive curriculums that are designed specifically for age groups. Um, they look very different and they
yeah,
sound very different.
yeah, and there's the link, to the simulations of adult roles, right? That's
Right.
on
So
the test.
then yeah, I orchestrated a grade wide field trip that took 2 days because it was a massive class. But we were able to visit the Moakley
Which is
courthouse. We were
in this
able to
picture. That's right.
exactly, yep, that's with Justice Kelly there, who sat down with us and answered our questions. It was a great tour. And then we went to the State House, toured, met with some of the representatives, walked into the House, walked into the Senate. It was
Nice.
an incredible moment for them to see these things come alive. And I also made sure, we were talking about student voice, and I wanted to make just one more point about student-led volunteer associations, because one of the important things that I did recently with a colleague is we redesigned the entire student government in our Cohasset Middle School, and it's a really exciting model that I'm excited to do some sort of thesis or presentation on at some point,
Neat.
because it irked me a little that so much power was concentrated, especially in the eighth grade. They were sort of the ones in charge of the school. And I said, I don't know if that's really showing students and demonstrating students what effective civic engagement and
Mhm.
government looks like.
Good point.
So, with a colleague of mine, we redesigned the entire thing
Huh.
so that now the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth grade, they all have about 4 or 5 representatives. And this is a small school. The class size is only about 300 total, but we have about a 20-person student government going right now.
That's
And it
right.
is so much fun
Yeah,
to
you mentioned
see
that
them.
you're the co-advisor for the middle
Yes.
school student council. That's cool.
Yeah. It
So
was
you're
a really
learning,
great way to introduce them to civics
right,
and then get them to practice it, especially in eighth grade,
and
because
you're
now they're
learning more
in that
yourself
course.
about the dynamics of civic engagement by watching your kids do that.
Oh
That's
yeah, and they're
great.
idea machines. It's incredible what they
They
can come up
are.
with.
Yeah, I love middle school kids. Look, I have asked people to go ahead and unmute in case there are questions, rather than putting any questions in the chat, which is not available. So if you are muted, you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions, make any comments.
Charlie and Aaron and Andy, this is DJ Champagne here in Missouri. And I am so thrilled by looking at you two youngsters from my old dinosaur perspective, okay? And feeling very, very pleased at what is carrying on. I worry about how much practice our youngsters get. I spend an awful lot of time with my own granddaughter on journal walkabouts and what have you. But I'm thrilled with you two. I am absolutely Charlie, you got the best right here.
I did.
I'm impressed.
I was lucky to be able to interact with both of them. Full disclosure, Aaron was actually one of my students. I think when you were doing your master's degree, I think, is that right?
Yes, you actually taught me about the civic engagement program that I still use as a model. So it's
yeah, Project Citizen.
Goodness.
Yep, Project Citizen. That was our course. Yep.
Well, thank you, DJ. I agree, and you can see why they are the way they are based on the experiences that they've had.
Yes, yes,
and those are crucial.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.
Both Daria or Deborah, any comments or questions? I see Daria. Go ahead, Daria.
Oh, yeah. My only comment is thank you. It is so inspiring. It's been my pleasure to participate.
Thank you.
To listen to you.
Thanks for joining us.
Well, we were glad to have you. In fact, I want to thank all of you on behalf of the Social Science Education Consortium and the partners in Civic Learning Week for coming to the webinar. This is being recorded, so we will be putting it up on our SSCC has a YouTube channel, so we'll be putting it up there. And I think you found the discussion stimulating, and as DJ said, I'm very fortunate to know these two folks, knew that they would be great role models for what we were looking at, and that they're going to keep on being good role models for civic engagement. So thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Andy, very much. And now you can get back to your 1-year-old. The rest is over. Now you got to get back to work. And I hope we'll keep in touch.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. This was great. And Aaron, thank you for all the work that you're doing in the classroom. I always say that teachers, when they die, they're going straight to heaven. They're cutting the line. So I thank you.
More lips to God's ears.
Yes.
And thank you for seeing through that legislation that made civics education possible for our students. I think it's going to do us a lot of good right now and in the long run. So
and remember, Civic Learning Week has just begun. So check it out and check out the events to go right through the 10th. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.